But I think this guy was a serial killer. I think he matches the description.
He could have killed me a couple times over there on that side when seeing me.
That idol is a demon, a self-proclaimed demon. I don't ride with demons. When did black people start riding with demons, homie?
King Von was not your typical Southside Chicago rapper. He supposedly left a trail of bodies around the city and was a walking nightmare. He allegedly took out Malcolm Stuckey and Gakira Barnes, flirted with a female police officer, and had a twisted feud with FBG Wooski. We're dissecting why King Von was viewed as the greatest threat to civilization in this video. From the incidents that shaped his turbulent career to the crimes and feuds, King Von was placed on the threat list. Due to the accusations of serial killing, Wad Up family, King Von's talent for blood was one of the most horrifying factors that made him a threat to society. It's no surprise that a rapper has ever been the target of horrific accusations. The hip-hop community was unprepared for what transpired after Trap Lore Ross released his documentary, King Von Rap's First Serial Killer, in April 2023. This wasn't just clickbait on YouTube. This provided a thorough analysis of how Von supposedly perfectly fit the FBI's criteria of a serial killer.
I think this guy was a serial killer. I think he matches the description. And I thought that was a really interesting conversation. And that's when the title of the video came about.
A serial murderer, according to the FBI, is someone who murders 3 or more people over the course of several events with cooling-off periods, frequently for psychological satisfaction. The documentary claims that between 2012 and 2019, Von committed at least 10 murders or attempted murders. Gang warfare is not what that is. That would be a hunting frenzy worthy of Jeffrey Dahmer. Von's propensity to pull triggers was not the only thing that set him apart from other street troops. Von's behavior pattern, as shown in the documentary, was exactly in line with FBI profiling. He sought public recognition for his killings, killed numerous people in various places and at various times, and received psychological satisfaction from the killings, like he was keeping score in a video game.
Let me tell you why I think Von's a serial killer. Now, I might not say Sammy the Bull's a serial killer. The reason that I thought Von was a serial killer, because I've come across people that have killed a lot of people in gang wars before.
This man was tweeting about Bodis Von and the Zodiac Killer were compared since both of them sent out codes to let everyone know they were murderers and enjoyed the spotlight. Von wasn't killing for territory or survival alone. He wanted everyone to know that he was the one pulling triggers. Thus he was murdering because he enjoyed it. The most unsettling aspect was that Trap Lore Ross tweeted a goat emoji minutes after FBG Duck was slain, stating that Von took personal pleasure in killing and wanted everyone to know about it. Street justice isn't like that. A sick person would celebrate murder as if it were a championship win. This, however, is what set Von apart from previous murderers. His methodical approach to killing. Von supposedly researched his targets, became familiar with their routines, and waited for the ideal opportunity to attack. In contrast to spontaneous acts of violence, he wasn't only a reactive person, he was deliberate, calculated, and utterly brutal in his execution. As his adversaries lived in continual fear, Von would vanish for days before a hit, only to reappear after the crime was committed, pretending nothing had happened. Due to intense criticism, the documentary was removed from YouTube 2 days after it was released and then put back up on April 11, 2023. Von's name continued to have sufficient clout to have things taken off from platforms. Even after his passing, it demonstrates the extent to which his reign of terror permeated Chicago streets and is the kind of influence that endures beyond death. Von's social media presence, which transformed murder into marketing and used his victims as material for his perverse amusement, set him apart from other killers. The K.I. Von became a legend because of the murder. Hold on, let's discuss the murder that made Von the most feared predator in Chicago. When Von decided she had to leave Gakira K.I., Barnes, who was a prolific female assassin in the Chicago gang war, found her equal, according to the Chicago Sun-Times.
17-year-old gangster disciple Gakira Barnes, aka K.I., was a legendary figure in Chicago gang history, with the Chicago Sun-Times describing her in a prominent feature as a prolific female assassin in the Chicago gang war. K.I. has been described as the real-life Snoop from The Wire, a reference to the masculine female killer from HBO's crime drama.
Trap Lore Ross, who set out to find out about Von's murderous rampage, asserted that the entire circumstance between Von and K.I. was extremely twisted. It was unclear whether Von was attempting to smoke or bash her throughout the years-long Twitter back and forth between these two. Von and K.I. initially interacted on September 25, 2012, when Von claimed in a tweet that he had assaulted an opposing girl on the train, threatening to put holes in faces in response. This is when it becomes truly sick though. Von had DM'd K.I., according to allegations made by a 4chan user who claimed to have stolen K.I.'s private communications, saying he wants to nail her. He asked if she wanted to hook up. Von apparently responded that he would have her after all was finished when she rejected him. That right there is manipulation on the level of a psychopath. Deranged mind was exposed by the purportedly private discussions.
More alleged tweets would see K.I. asking Von straight up if O-Block are plotting to kill her, to which Von replies, he's not gonna lie, there are people looking to kill her. But Von would say he doesn't think he can kill her because he thinks she seems cool as hell, even having the nerve to ask her when she's going to stop gangbang.
In these stolen direct messages, K.I. Von said he wasn't going to lie when he was asked directly if O-Block was planning to kill her. He said he didn't think he could kill her because she appeared cool, even though there were individuals who wanted to kill her, inquiring as to when she would put an end to gangbanging. Von's purported manipulation techniques against K.I. shown a degree of mental complexity that was considerably above and beyond the usual violence of gangs. He was planning her death and creating a fake connection as part of a long-term mental game. He allegedly built a poisonous dynamic that kept K.I. by combining threats with genuine affection, strategically vulnerable, and emotionally bewildered. Eliminating an enemy was not the only goal here. Shattering someone's spirit before shattering their body was the goal here. Then later that day, K.I. would be standing on a nearby porch in the 6400 block of South Everhart Avenue, about 3 minutes walk from the place she had tweeted earlier that day, heading towards O-Block, and King Von was supposed to locate the woman he had been searching for all this time. On that day, Von is said to have located the woman he was hunting on April 11th, 2014. K.I. would be just 3 minutes walk from O-Block, standing on a porch close by in the 6400 block of South Everhart Avenue. According to the murder report, K.I. was caught by a shooter who leaped from a car, and a second man who were going to roll dice. The gunman continued shooting at K.I., seemingly while yelling, "Yeah, individuals." Several times. 2 hours later, she would be shot 9 times and pronounced dead. The execution was methodical and brutal. It takes more than 9 shots to ensure someone dies. To anyone who would consider crossing Von, that is a message. This wasn't simply business, as evidenced by the claims that he yelled taunts while filming. It was a sense of fulfillment for the individual. Von had transformed murder into a theatrical performance, with himself as the main character and his victims as unwitting props in his bizarre production. Von's cunning was also exposed. By the timing of the crime, using social media, he had been following K.I.'s whereabouts in anticipation of the ideal opportunity to exploit her. Von may have been observing, waiting, and organizing this execution for the ideal moment to arrive, as evidenced by the fact that she was only 3 minutes from O-Block. At the time of her death, there was more disdain than that. Von did something years later that even seasoned crooks found unsettling. He pretended to be innocent while the cameras were rolling in a documentary about the girl he is accused of killing, Von's most insane act, which was shown in the documentary about his victim. Wait until you hear about Von's most bizarre act. If you thought his killing rampage was sick, on May 23, 2019, a K.I. documentary was released.
I was trying to.
When you tweeted once, you said you miss her.
Yeah. Cause we used to be talking on the phone. Like that's somebody like say somebody you DM and talking to, and then one day they just gone. Now you like, damn, who the f*** gonna talk to him now?
Secret Life of a Gang Girl would be broadcast. Additionally, King Von had a significant role in the documentary, presenting himself as a devoted fan who pursued K.I. for amorous purposes. When discussing a girl he allegedly killed, this maniac actually sat down with TV cameras and pretended to be innocent. That is warped behavior on par with Jeffrey Dahmer. It's absurd that the film crew didn't even suspect Von was behind the murder, especially considering that rumors of him being K.I.'s killer were already circulating on 4chan in 2016. 2 years after the murder and 3 years prior to the documentary, Von's deceptive performance in that documentary was Oscar-worthy. He was able to present himself as a young man who was truly concerned about K.I. and was heartbroken. He even implied that he was attempting to persuade her to quit the streets. He displayed a level of psychopathy that is very terrifying when he talked about her with what seemed to be sincere emotion, despite knowing that he reportedly killed her. Von's use of the documentary is just another tool of psychological warfare against K.I.'s friends and family is what makes this even more unsettling. They had to witness the supposed murderer of their loved ones sit on national television, portraying the victim and winning over people who were unaware that they were staring at a possible killer. It was the most serious infraction, not just killing someone, but also using their story for one's own benefit. A few hours after K.I. was declared dead, Von was already rejoicing on Twitter. In an interview with Cam Capone, O-Block veteran Jay Hood would disclose that Von returned to O-Block and told him what he had done right after the murder, stating that she was the last person to leave the gate and that he had obviously shot her down.
But he literally say just like this. I'm looking straight. He meant why I just run up on K.I. and he know why I just ran up on them and caught K.I. She was the last one running out of the gate. I was like, no way.
Von's claimed private confessions to his buddies and his public image in the documentary juxtapose, exposing the full extent of his deceptive skills. Depending on his audience and goals, he might be a cold-blooded killer or a charming, sympathetic character, because people could never tell which version of Von they were dealing with. His chameleon-like nature made him even more dangerous, although the state chose not to prosecute, claiming that the case would not meet the burden of proof necessary. To secure a conviction, the Chicago police would later release documents in 2021, indicating that they believed King Von himself to be K.I.'s killer, with multiple witnesses reportedly identifying Von as the shooter. Additionally, the documentary appearance was used to mock the legal system and law enforcement. In essence, Von was stating that he could kill someone and then describe his victim on national television without being held accountable. It was a show of his alleged invulnerability and a reprimand to anyone who may attempt to hold him responsible. Von's thinking was so twisted that he had the gall to portray the devastated admirer in a documentary about your victim. This was more than simply a murderer. The attention and nasty prank he was pulling on everyone in the audience were exploited by this manipulator. No one realized they were seeing the murderer describe his victim with fictitious tears in his eyes, as Von used K.I.'s death as his own amusement. More killings were planned as a result of Von's realization that he could get away with anything due to this degree of psychopathic behavior. Von killed Malcolm Stuckey, an innocent person, because he was ugly. Von's petty and lethal nature was demonstrated by this murder. On May 29, 2014, Malcolm Stuckey, a 19-year-old basketball player and college student from Maywood, Illinois, was murdered at a birthday celebration in the Englewood neighborhood of Chicago. The bizarre part is that Stuckey allegedly gave Von offensive looks at a party, which is how the entire murder allegedly began. In connection with the incident, which left 2 other people injured, Von was charged with first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. At the celebration, Von and his pal Big Mike spotted competitors Marquise Carpenter and Timothy Robinson. Von went back with a .40 Smith & Wesson, shot Stuckey in the head, and then shot another man in the foot and broke his jaw. This is where things start to become really bad. Von reportedly said he wouldn't make trouble in her home after being instructed not to buy the mother of the person whose birthday celebration it was, and then he left. Von would leave the party to go retrieve Big Mike, seemingly informing someone on the phone who is still there that he would return, and that they should bring the kids inside. Von's actual nature is shown by the deliberate nature of this crime. He didn't lash out in a fit of rage. He deliberately left, armed himself, and came back to carry out his violent mission. He knew exactly what he was about to do and didn't care about innocent bystanders who might be caught in the crossfire, as evidenced by the fact that he ordered someone to get the kids inside. The fact that Von didn't even mean to kill Malcolm Stuckey is what makes this murder so horrible. Von was accused of attempting to murder gang rivals, but an innocent young guy was killed as a result of his careless firing and bad aim. As a college student, Stuckey was attempting to succeed, someone who brought optimism to a violent community, and Von extinguished that light out of what he saw as contempt. Von and Big Mike would go back to that gathering, park farther down the street, and then go up to 3 males outside the home and start shooting, as Von pursued them, purportedly shouting, "Why are you running?" 3 of those men would be shot down, and when the gunfire ceased, Malcolm Stuckey would be pronounced dead from a gunshot wound to the head. Von's violent and predatory behavior is demonstrated by the picture of him chasing his victims while shooting and taunting them. This was not a brief altercation. Von took pleasure in frightening his prey throughout this hunt. He was enjoying the power and fear he was instilling, as evidenced by the fact that he was shouting at people to stop running while shooting at them. Malcolm, who was purportedly not the original target or even involved in the gang fight, was the sole person killed by Von Ho. Apparently tried to murder 2 opposing gang members he observed at the party and ended up hitting 3 others. The coldness of the murder sprang from this. Von killed a young man who was innocent, but happened to be in the wrong location at the wrong time. Malcolm's untimely death serves as a reminder that Von's brutality had an impact on entire communities. In addition to his chosen victims, a person becomes a threat to everyone when they are prepared to open fire in a crowded environment without consideration for innocent bystanders. Because of Von's heedless contempt for human life, even innocent persons could be executed, just being in his immediate presence. Von was accused of 2 counts of attempted murder and first-degree murder, but he won the case in December 2017 when witnesses chose not to testify, most likely out of fear for their safety. Big Mike first consented to testify against Von, but he then changed his mind, which caused the case to fall apart. Von would tweet that he had some problems, but that he couldn't tell anyone about them while Malcolm lay in the street for hours, with a bullet in his brain, just 12 minutes before he would be declared dead. That's the kind of heartless mindset we're up against. Sending cryptic tweets while innocent people are dying after shooting them. It demonstrates how deranged Von was that he could kill a college kid over alleged disrespect. Von's murderous rampage began with the execution of Modell McCambry, let's discuss the murder that served as the catalyst for Von's terror campaign in Chicago. On October 13, 2012, 17-year-old Modell McDambry, a member of the Gangster Disciples GDS, St. Lawrence Eberhart, STL-EBT faction, was murdered in Chicago's South Side in June 2022. The Chicago Police Department CPD recognized King Von, who was 18 at the time and a member of the Black Disciples BD from Oblad, as the main suspect in Modell's murder. Von's actions on social media that day only served to heighten the anxiety around this murder. I just walked through Mo by mean. The whole mob and ain't just seen not nobody #struggle. Von tweeted hours before the murder, alluding to mob, a GD faction that rivals Oblak. Von was apprehended for unlawful use of a weapon by a felony after the incident and was pursued by police. This is made even more twisted by the backstory. King Doc, actual name Marlon Monroe, was killed on April 28, 2012, and his body was found by 16-year-old cousin Modell McCambry. Doc would be shot as he entered a convenience shop, and his cousin Modell would discover him dead. Modell would subsequently start to become more involved in the local gangs. Seemingly wounded by the loss of his cousin, Von exploited pain to excuse his crimes. As evidenced by the recurring pattern of this violence, Modell wasn't a hapless victim. He had experienced trauma from violence, which led him to get further involved in the criminal underworld. Von is accused of taking advantage of that weakness and making Modell just another victim in Chicago's never-ending cycle of reprisals. Von's claimed exploitation of Modell's grief against him is what makes this murder so unsettling. For someone as cunning as Von, the young man was an easy target, since he was looking for justice or a sense of belonging and was attempting to make meaning of his cousin's death. It demonstrates how predators like Von might spot emotional weak points and take use of them for their own destructive ends. A gunman, purportedly Von, came up and started shooting at Modell McCambry and his cousin Miles Turner as they were making their way to see a female. Modell passed away immediately after being shot in the back of the skull. Despite surviving 5 gunshot wounds, Turner was rendered crippled. Von's cowardly approach to murder is demonstrated by the manner in which this murder was carried out, shooting the victim in the back of the head. This was not an in-person conflict between competitors. The purpose of this ambush was to prevent the victim from defending himself. Von has a total disdain for collateral damage, as evidenced by the fact that he also shot and paralyzed an innocent cousin. Von's response was purely malevolent. Von was identified as the lone shooter in Modell murder in a June 2022 CPD report, but no charges were brought against him while he was still alive. Von wasn't merely celebrating a kill when he sent out the icy-cold tweet, "Who died?" following the murder. This was warfare of the mind. Von's tweet's timing reveals all. The universal synchronized time used by Twitter is 6 hours ahead of Chicago time. It was around 9:30 p.m. when Modell was shot, Chicago time, which indicates that King Von posted the tweet "Who died" around 17 minutes after Modell was murdered. A tweet that stated, "It's not safe around our way," which was sent less than an hour after the incident, followed that one. These timestamps' accuracy demonstrates Von's systematic approach to his psychological warfare campaign. He wasn't tweeting at random. He was establishing a purposeful sequence of actions intended to frighten his adversaries and make them realize that he was accountable for their defeats. A person who was totally at ease with violence and eager to take credit for it is demonstrated by the rapid transition from murder to social media joy. For years, Von would keep making fun of Modell on social media, calling him a straight sucker and inquiring as to who killed him. The pattern for all of Von's subsequent killings was established. By this murder, the hunt, the execution, and the subsequent ill-fated festivity. Rodney Stewart and Derek P5 Crack Johnson, the double murders. Wait. Let's examine 2 additional victims who were added to Von's purported death toll in late 2012. These killings demonstrated Von's unrelenting killing rampage as he dropped bodies one after the other, like he was playing a computer game. On October 30th, 2012, Derek P5 Crack Johnson, a 19-year-old suspected Gangster Disciples GD member, was slain. Police claim that P5, also known as Cracked, would be shot several times in the 6200 block of South Eberhart Avenue, less than 30 minutes after Von tweeted, "Check the stats." A reference to who has the most bodies in the ongoing gang battle. At approximately 9:13 a.m. Von's tweet timing was blatantly incriminating. 3 minutes prior to the shooting's recorded time, Von tweeted, "Laughing my ass off." 9 minutes later, at 9:13, when the police estimated the shooting occurred, Von tweeted, "His 45 makes his ass do 40 flips." A few hours after this early morning murder, Von would tweet, "The early bird catches the worm," before continuing to discuss operations making the news. In this instance, Von's perverse sense of humor and his delight in taking the initiative to commit murder are exposed by the expression "early bird catches the worm." He wasn't only a threat-reactive person, he took delight in reaching his adversaries before they could reach him and was actively hunting them down. he had lost any sense of the worth of human life, as evidenced by the fact that he could make such light of murder. Johnson was recognized as a GD member from the 63rd Street neighborhood, and the murder was connected to the ongoing dispute between O-Block BD and STLEBTGD, using Johnson's moniker as a joke. Vaughn would post on Twitter, "Damn, Odell got killed in October, and Crack, who's going to get killed in November. Stay tuned." Vaughn views murder as entertainment, as evidenced by the "stay tuned" comment. He was portraying himself as the protagonist of this terrible play, creating tension over who would die next, and treating the deaths of actual people like TV program episodes. Next up was Boss Trill, also known as Rodney Stewart. On November 9, 2012, Rodney Stewart, a 20-year-old suspected Gangster Disciples GD member, was slain. Vaughn would tweet about bodies dropping and beating the case on November 7, 2012. He would tweet later that night claiming he was out sliding with T.I. Roy. The collaboration between T and Vaughn, one of the deadliest teams in Chicago gang history, was represented by Roy. These two took advantage of each other's aggression and fought to see who could kill more people. Their activities on social media expose a cruel game in which people who had lost all morality competed against one another, reducing human lives to points. The news would report about Boss Trill's shooting the next morning. Around 6:50 a.m., Boss Trill was discovered with a gunshot wound to the head and was sent to the hospital right away. Vaughn and T were in the hospital, fighting for Boss Trill's life. Roy would be making fun of it on Twitter. 2 hours after the death was found, Roy tweeted, "Man down?" and Vaughn responded with the #struggle. Vaughn would later claim that individuals aren't dying in a timely manner. Additionally, Roy would sarcastically tweet, "No Trill, stay alive." Boss Trill would be declared dead at 11:30 p.m. that evening. "People aren't dying on time," expresses Vaughn's frustration with the dying process and his need for instant satisfaction from his acts of violence. In order to go on to the next victim and carry out his murderous rampage, he wanted his victims to perish as soon as possible. Vaughn's disdain persisted after the killing. King Vaughn would again make fun of Boss Trill and his operations on Twitter. The next day, he would tweet that STL stands for Steady Taking L's, rather than St. Lawrence. "Don't worry about who killed whom." King Vaughn would say in a subsequent tweet, "Just shut up and be happy you weren't killed." King Vaughn was turning into a full-fledged serial murderer after these back-to-back killings in late 2012. He was chasing down his adversaries like it was hunting season and posting about each kill on social media. Vaughn's bashing down operations, assaulting guards, and terrorizing the jail. A demon cannot be subdued by bars when he is in prison. All they provide him is a smaller hunting area. Rehabilitating King Vaughn was not the goal of his incarceration. The goal was to show every inmate in that facility who had even locked up. He remained the building's most dangerous individual. The altercation in the jail in 2019 demonstrated just what kind of animal Vaughn was in a cage. Vaughn, who can be recognized by his blue helmet and dreads, is seen starting a brawl in a jail holding cell on surveillance film. Officers pepper spray him when he hits another prisoner and persists in doing so. The weird part comes next. Vaughn wasn't even meant to be the one who started the fight. He resolved to transform that man's face into hamburger meat after approaching him as though he were out for a stroll. Vaughn was totally at ease being the predator in whatever setting, as seen by the carelessness with which he handled violence in prison. The majority of prisoners attempt to stay out of trouble and keep their heads down. However, Vaughn deliberately pursued conflict since, even in prison, he used violence to establish his authority and uphold his reputation. Vaughn's total lack of concern about the repercussions was what made him especially dangerous in prison. Vaughn appeared to function under the belief that he was already facing life in prison when most prisoners fear further charges or longer sentences. What difference did a few additional costs make? Because of this, he was erratic and a serious threat to both guards and prisoners. Vaughn's mindset was aptly encapsulated in the 2019 pepper spray incident. Vaughn is seen on surveillance starting a fight in a holding room while wearing dreads and a blue cap. He punches another prisoner and keeps going after officials intervene and pepper spray him to break up the altercation. This creature was not instantly vanquished by chemical weapons. Vaughn's claimed to be gay in order to obtain protective custody, however, was his most premeditated maneuver while there. The majority of street guys would rather risk their lives in public than jeopardize their manhood. Vaughn, however, was incredibly strategic.
So because of your sexual orientation, you're requesting protective custody, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Bye, Lil Josh.
Vaughn was exposed as a brilliant manipulator on the body cam clip. Vaughn put on a straight face when telling the officer he was gay, and then he started making fun of other prisoners by shouting inappropriate remarks to officers and other inmates and blowing a kiss to one inmate. Vaughn intensified the exchange. Von's ability to separate his survival instinct from his street notoriety is demonstrated by the protective custody action. He was prepared to temporarily give up his manly identity in order to obtain a tactical edge, since he realized that upholding his reputation wasn't worth risking his life for. This demonstrates someone who, when his life was on the line, was able to plan several steps ahead and wasn't constrained by conventional street laws. Von's actions were understood by the streets. On Instagram stories, No Limit Cairo explained Von's intentions, stating that he was trolling to get put on another deck and advising others to stop disseminating misleading information. Von was running a game on the system.
He doesn't want anything. He just wants to move across the hall. I asked him if he wanted a piece and he don't want it. He just wants to move across the hall. So we're not doing that right now.
When Von believed no one of importance was looking, the beating episode in the jail revealed his true nature in a packed jail holding cell. Von is shown on overhead camera punching a rival gang member several times as other inmates look on, or momentarily participate. Von took a different stance on jail violence than other prisoners. Von fought because he wanted to, while most people fight because they have to. Von delivers quick punches to the head and torso in a one-sided attack, as he approaches an unprepared prisoner in the video. Von's alleged behavior on the streets is mirrored in the methodical way he pursued violence in prison, researching his targets, waiting for the ideal opportunity, and then attacking with tremendous force. He had made violence his science, and prison was merely another testing ground for his methods. Von's drive to control and intimidate was unabated by prison walls. Being in prison just served to focus his violence in a more condensed area. The interrogation of the female guard, Von, deranged mental tricks. Now let's discuss one of Von's most unsettling instances of his cunning. Instead of expressing regret or cooperation, this man chose to use the interrogation as his own comedy. Show after getting into a brawl in jail and being summoned in for questioning.
Can you tell me what happened?
I got maced.
Why'd you get made?
I was in the hallway.
You was in the hallway.
I was in the barbershop. Hit the corner. Who maced me still? I don't know. Somebody maced me.
They just maced you for no reason?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You got any injuries?
Yeah.
Did you receive medical attention?
No, I talked to the counselor. I ain't get no.
Psych, you talked to psych staff?
Attention in the questioning video. His answers were vague and humorous, which is typical of his trolling approach. In the King Von interview after Jail Fight October 2016 video, Von turns a serious questioning into a lighthearted one by flirting with a female prison officer. Von claims in the video that he was maced without cause in the corridor beside the barbershop, then using charm to interact with the guard, making light of the situation. Von's demeanor during the inquiry was consistent with his reputation as a busy troll. Von demonstrated his confidence and disrespect for authority by flirting and making jokes with the guard, which took the focus off the fight's gravity. With remarks like King Von was a demon, no cap, and LLKV. Admirers praised Von's personality, and the video went viral after his death.
What happened on 3B?
You came and got me out my cell.
That's it?
You made me pack my stuff. And you punched me when I was walking out.
Would you like to press charges?
Oh, you?
Would you like to press charges on the person you were fighting?
You don't even want to hit me.
In another video, Von ridiculed the procedure while remaining casual when asked what had transpired. Von had already made a name for himself as a man who commanded respect via fear during his incarceration in Cook County Jail from 2014 to 2017 while battling murder accusations. Inmates nicknamed him Grandson during this time because of his behavior, which was likened to that of Black Disciples founder David Barksdale. Von's violence was neither reactionary or situational. As the inquiry revealed, it was a fundamental aspect of his character that manifested itself in whatever situation. Von continued to be a predator, searching for his next victim, whether he was in a cell or on the streets of Chicago, making even police interrogation amusing. How Von made murder a meme in Smoking Tuka. Hold on while we discuss one of Von's most egregious and perverse actions. How he made a national meme out of the name of a deceased adolescent. Shondale Tuka Gregory, a 15-year-old Southside Chicago resident, was a member of the Gangster Disciples GD. Killed in a gang-related shooting at a bus stop on January 12, 2011, Von did something very diabolical to this child's memory. Through his music, social media, and public remarks, Von disrespected Tuka, making the phrase smoking Tuka a well-known and contentious drill culture slang term. Von didn't only make fun of Tuka though, he made a brand out of the boy's death. King Von rapped Tuka in my lung. I say that every time cause he got smoked in his 2020 song, All These Niggas, which featured Lil Durk and was taken from his album, Welcome to O Block. This line specifically mentioned Tuka's death, using the phrase smoking Tuka to imply disrespect by comparing his murder to smoking strong marijuana. However, it gets worse. Von rapped smoking on this Tuka pack and it's loud as fuck. Caught Tuka ass getting off the bus on his unreleased drill single How I Rock, which featured Polo G. These lyrics make fun of Tuka's passing by, bringing up the bus stop shooting, and implying continued disrespect. I know Tuka mad as hell. He probably tired of us. But when I die, find Tuka ass, and I'ma beat him up. King Von tried to minimize the insult on Instagram Live before his death in November 2020 by saying that Tuka was slang for strong marijuana and wasn't a direct reference to Shondell Gregory. Given the context of his songs, fans and commentators deemed this explanation contradictory, and it was widely ridiculed as an excuse. Von's frequent allusions to Tuka in his songs and online persona increased the term's awareness. Fans and critics examined Von's preoccupation with Tuka on social media sites like Reddit and Twitter. Some speculate that it was because Tuka had beaten him up in the past, or that it was only because Tuka's death was a high-profile event in the BDGD rivalry. Tuka's mother, Dominique Boyd, has openly denounced the disrespect. Focusing on rappers like Lil Durk, Chief Keef, and King Von, Boyd talked about how hurt she was in an interview in 2020. She asked why her son was still being singled out by rappers, pointing out that he was a person with a family, not a cannabis strain. Von's promotion of smoking Tuka demonstrated the extent of his mental instability, bringing a bereaved mother unending suffering while transforming a murdered child.
For a long time, people thought my son was a strand of weed, not knowing that he's an actual person. Because they came up with that song, Smoking on Tuka. That's not no weed, that's my son. That's what I brought in this world. That's what God gave me. I can't never stop grieving because every time I turn around, it's like he's being brought up. He's been gone 11 years. What could he do to y'all? Why y'all can't leave him alone?
Right.
He can't do nothing to nobody. Nobody. For some reason, they still feel like intimidated by him. I don't get it.
Into entertainment.a violation occurs with FBG Butter.
Why they won't let him rest? Like it was people dead before my son was dead. Why y'all can't talk about them? And my baby bleed. God, this and dead people. I never heard that before. Like, I never heard that until, like you say, my son. But he ain't got nothing to do with none of this mess. You know what I'm saying? It's just. Stop dissing people dead. You know what I'm saying? Where and how does this industry accept these people doing that?
Von's vicious harassment on social media. Now, let's discuss how Von completely ruined FBG Butter on social media by engaging in some of the most offensive trolling Chicago has ever witnessed. There was much more to these two's feud than just rap. Von made sure everyone realized that this was a personal matter. King Von and FBG Butter's feud began when they were teenagers when Von and FBG members, such as Butter and FBG Duck, got into intense arguments on Twitter. However, a particular incident that plagued Von for years served as the true source of their animosity. The purported jumping of King Von by FBG Butter and FBG Duck on a CTA bus in 2012 or 2013 marked a major turning point. Butter explained in a 2023 Vlad TV interview how he and Duck assaulted Von in an effort to pull him from the bus where a shooter was waiting to murder him. Members of the Killa Ward stepped in and kept Von on the bus. Later, FBG Duck recalled Von curling up throughout the pounding, while Butter saw Von barely retaliated, but Von used social media cruelty to exact his revenge. The most well-known incident happened on Twitter in September 2020, when Von shared two pictures of Butter on X1 as a snapshot of a video, in which Butter says, "I don't know," and the other is from the album cover of Lil KP, Blue Moon. Von captioned it, "Get your fat weak rapping ass on, DJ Chop Squad looking ass Wheezy, out of here looking ass. That little ass roll, fat ass glasses. Ham hock pig feet, pickle legs, eating ass, cockeyed ass." These taunts centered on Butter's music, weight, and appearance, disparagingly comparing him to DJ Chop Squad and Lil Wayne. Fans responded with "fried his ass" and "too funny," which increased the post's reach and earned it over 1,000 likes. Von trolling was at its best here, making fun of Butter's body in the most offensive way imaginable, by utilizing images of food. August 2020, Von posted on Twitter, "Yo, fat, sweaty, musty, knock-kneed ass, beanbag body ass, pie face ass." Some Reddit users conjectured was directed at Butter because of his physique. Von wasn't merely teasing. In front of thousands, he was methodically undermining Butter's self-worth. In interviews conducted following Von's passing in 2023 and 2024, Butter addressed Von's trolling but did not specifically address the fat shaming on Twitter. He referred to Von as a troll that got busy, highlighting his violent side while still recognizing his sense of humor. According to Vlad TV footage, Butter claimed that Von's trolling didn't really bother him because their actual disagreement stemmed from occurrences that happened on the street. He insisted that he was glad the man was slain and that King Von was his favorite opponent.
You know what I'm saying? This is my favorite op, shorty. Like, on my DM with late.
King Von was your favorite op?
Hell yeah.
Okay. Well, right after Duck gets killed, King Von gets killed, right? When you heard that, considering the back and forth that y'all have had in your own ways, how did you feel?
So I kind of happy.
You were happy he was killed?
Can I say I was kind of happy? No, just fucking. No, seriously, I was though. It was that, you know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, he did. But I was happy as hell when I found out Von was dead. Cooked for the whole day. For all the people I fucked with.
Similar to FBG, Von was one of the most feared trolls in Chicago drill culture due to his ability to combine comedy and outright disdain, demonstrating that his psychological warfare was just as lethal as his purported trigger finger. Duty Low. In FBG is Roasted, the Chronicles of Baldhead.now. Let's shift our focus to Von's demonstration that his vicious trolling even threatened his own comrades. King Von was well known for his gregarious and frequently vicious trolling tactics, and Duty Low discovered firsthand that sharing a label would not shield one from being roasted. In a behind-the-scenes video that went viral on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, Von was seen saying the vicious statement in response to Duty Low getting a haircut, a call, and make a grown man get out his bed to come shave your bald head that's already shaved. Bro, this joke implied that it's superfluous and humorous. That Duty Low, who is bald, is still looking for barber services. Using an exaggerated roast-like style that is characteristic of Von's humor, the trolling capitalizes on Duty's look by highlighting his lack of hair. Von can be seen laughing and teasing in the video, transforming an ordinary incident into viral material, with subtitles like "Enjoy a hilarious moment" as King Von jokes about Duty Low getting a haircut despite being bald and King Von trolling Duty Low's bald haircut. Fans and commentators on TikTok have called it amusing. Laughing emojis and hashtag King Von, hashtag Duty Low are frequently used in reactions, which increases the clip's posthumous reach. This happened at a laid-back get-together, or behind-the-scenes session, most likely during their collaboration on the song Me and Duty Low, which was released on August 21, 2020. Von wasn't the only one who trotted. Within OBF, he was well known for such lighthearted roasts, including body shaming and attacks based on appearance. The problem is that this wasn't a serious beef. Von helped launch Duty Low's career by funding his first music video. They worked together on the song Me and Duty Low off Von's 2020 album, Welcome to Oblot, in which they spoke about street life, loyalty, and shared experiences without criticizing one another. Duty Low has praised Von since his death in November 2020, in interviews like The Danza Project, December 2024, where he talked about overcoming addiction and parenting while mentioning OBF's unity, which includes Von. He also discussed his first encounter with Von with No Jumper.
Yeah. How'd you meet Von? At what point did you meet him and how'd that relationship come together?
Shit, when bro got out, when he got out of jail.
Okay, so you didn't know him before all that?
Nah, I knew about Von, but talked to him on the phone, but when Von got out of jail, that's when me and Von got real close.
Okay. Do you remember like the first time that Dirk started telling you about Von and how he's gonna really be pushing him as an artist?
Like, all that shit just came, you know what I'm saying? Everything just, we ain't talk about, like, this shit just, Von wasn't planning on rapping when he got, you know what I'm saying, that he just started rapping.
Yeah, because once you really start to learn more about Von, it is pretty unbelievable that he went through everything that he went through and then actually managed to really blow up as big as he did in only a couple of short years.
He's destined for that shit. That was in him.
Yeah.
Let's go back to their relationship and their banter. Von's childish behavior was a little strange given their cool mutual familiarity. However, in Chicago's drill culture, where artists frequently utilize comedy to connect or decompress in the high-stakes world of street life and gang connections, it was a common occurrence. Von's charisma and dominance were demonstrated by his ability to taunt his own comrades while still remaining loyal. Even his pals had to put up with being sexually assaulted for amusement. Wooski Beatdown in FBG, Von's greatest triumph. Wait, let's explore what could be Von's most fulfilling triumph. He allegedly beat down FBG Wooski in front of O-Block at that time. This was no ordinary street brawl. Von was demonstrating his supremacy against one of his fiercest opponents on his own soil. Because of their ties to rival Chicago gangs O-Block BD 64th Street and STL Tookaville, GD 63rd Street, King Von and FBG Wooski developed a feud in the early 2010s. The drill music movement was formed by a spiral of retaliatory violence that engulfed both areas. After growing up in Parkway Gardens with his older brother Big Mike, ABD, Wooski changed his allegiance to GDN, became associated with STL, EBT, an opposing faction to O'Block. This change led to conflict because Wooski was initially protected by his blood ties to a BD member, but his GD allegiance turned him into a target ad. It was alleged that Wooski, then 12 years old, killed Reezy, a member of WIC City BD, during a fight with STL members. This put a stop to Big Mike's protection and made Wooski the target of BDS revenge, including Von's O-Block gang. However, the fist fight in front of O-Block is the most famous encounter. Wooski made a daring move by fighting near 64th Street and Martin Luther King Drive, which was deep in BD territory. Wooski ran into Von while he was spinning the block with STL EBT members. Wooski emphasized the ferocity of the bout and called it a crazy fight in an interview with Cam Capone News. He said that he and his crew were caught off guard by Von, which resulted in a physical altercation. By portraying it as a moment of domination over Von in his own domain, Wooski implied that he was in control. There are different accounts of who won in certain sources. While Wooski's story focuses on surprising Von, Von's followers assert that he held his own. Although there is no film of the altercation, it was widely discussed and contributed to street lore. Another STL member, FBG Pressure, is mentioned in a linked clip as saying that he and Wooski jumped Von together, further humiliating Von because it was an unfair one. This is consistent with drill culture's focus on identifying weaknesses in competitors. Their antagonism was heightened when the fight turned into a major issue of concern.
I interviewed somebody, man, and they was telling me about a time when you and Von got in a fight in front of O-Block. And I wanted to get your side of that story.
Oh, shit. That's a funny ass, old ass, goofy shit. When we walked on King Drive and they was standing right there and the police and shit pulled up and they thought they was just gonna stand right there. We got the whooping their ass and shit. Me and him got the fighting, then some other motherfucker came and jumped in and the police came and broke the fight up. We all got up out of there.
So you guys didn't even really get to really fight. You guys just kind of just went at it a little bit and then the police kind of broke it up?
Yeah.
Was that the only time you guys got in a fight?
Hell yeah.
Okay. Cause I know you guys got you guys kind of had like a rivalry going, that it seemed a little bit more personal between you guys.
Von's reputation was perceived as being directly challenged by Wooski's audacity in facing him on O-Block territory. Being a proud person, Von probably took this personally, which fueled his future vengeful actions. The conflict intensified after Wooski and STL EBT members allegedly assassinated HK Headshot King, an O-Block member. While Von was incarcerated 2014 to 2017, Von's team placed a bounty on him when Wooski threatened him online, saying he was the next to go. Even though this fight demonstrated that Von could be caught slipping, it also inspired him to become even more deadly the next time he set foot on the streets. The fight that ended it all in Quando Rondo? Let's dissect the last encounter that resulted in Von's death. The altercation outside Monaco Hookah Lounge with Quando Rondo that quickly turned tragic. This wasn't your average street fight. For a man who thrived on violence and was unable to resist one final hunt, this was the inevitable outcome. On November 6, 2020, King Von and Quando Rondo got into a fight outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta, Georgia. King Von died at the age of 26 after what started as a verbal altercation turned into a physical altercation and, finally, a deadly gunfire. Going through this is losing so many people. Gang, I lost so many people. Man, going through this, man, crazy. But now look where we at right now. You see what I'm saying? Like times like this, you got to take it in. I just told my homie we gotta take this in. You see what I'm saying? Looking for day one, this and we in this winning. Man, we living on King Day when we ain't dead and we in the jail. In 2018, Quando Rondo established himself in NBA YoungBoy's Never Broke Again collective, and Von became Lil Durk's apprentice under the Only the Family label. Not all of these were record deals. During the Cold War, these were military allegiances. In hip-hop, Von played YoungBoy's song Play With Us during an Instagram live session sometime in 2018 or 2019, stating that he was wondering what YoungBoy was talking about because he was saying strange things that weren't true to him and that his raps contained phony content. Questioning someone's genuineness is essentially a declaration of war in the hypersensitive world of drill music. Although this may sound like a typical rap feud, in 2019 there were speculations that Von was romantically involved with Youngboy's ex-girlfriend and new mother, Jania Meshel, after Von shared pictures of the two of them on Instagram.
What Youngboy talking about on this song, bro?
What?
He talking crazy on this one.
Oh yeah?
He ain't even like that.
Oh!
On his ass, man.
On his ass?
All that cap. You got cap in your raps.
Youngboy's camp viewed the move as the height of disrespect, regardless of whether they were merely creating music or something else was going on.
I've been walking through a van, it's decent in this that's all around. You know, we trying to party and have fun in this bitch, I ain't gonna lie. We got the little bougie, they acting bougie right here. They right here. Y'all better stop that, man. So we finna tee up.
Von's major character flaw, his inability to back down from a confrontation, was exposed. On the evening of November 6, 2020, his last single, Welcome to Obla, was the commercial apex of his career and debuted at number 5 on the Billboard 200. Approximately 4 a.m. surveillance footage from outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in downtown Atlanta shows what started as a random run-in between two groups and turned violent. Von should have returned to his Airbnb after his performance at Opium nightclub, but something changed his mind. The security film depicts a man who was unable to avoid a final altercation. Von can be seen on camera approaching Quando Rando's group, which is followed by a violent confrontation that swiftly got out of hand. Everything went to ruin in a matter of seconds after Von delivered the opening blow. Quando Rando's close friend Timothy Lowe, Tim Leaks, emerged from behind an SUV and opened fire, hitting Von many times in the first encounter. Von and Mark Blakely were among the 6 persons shot in the tumultuous scene, and 3 of them died. Last moments were as turbulent as his life, with his demons finally catching up to him as he battled to the last. NBA Youngboy, the never-ending rap battle. This feud characterized Von's last years and ultimately played a role in his demise. There was more to King Von and NBA Youngboy's dispute than just music. This was a full-fledged conflict that spread from Atlanta's streets to social media. The intricate web of street, relationships, and rap business intrigues that characterized the contemporary drill scene was where Von's demise began. NBA Youngboy from Baton Rouge swept the charts with his Never Broke Again collective, while Von became Lil Durk's protege under Only the Family. Von's choice to openly disparage NBA Youngboy's street reputation was the first gun fired in this fatal altercation. Von played Youngboy's song Play With Us during an Instagram live session sometime in 2018 or 2019, stating that he was wondering what Youngboy was talking about because he was saying strange things that weren't true to him and that his raps contained phony content. But when passion entered the equation, it became personal. In 2019, there were rumors that Von was romantically involved with Jania Meshel, Youngboy's ex-girlfriend and baby mother. After Von shared pictures of the two of them on Instagram, Youngboy's camp viewed this as the biggest infraction, regardless of whether they were merely creating music or something more was going on. Von's delusion of security in the latter days of his life was what made this circumstance terrible. He claimed in an interview that unless someone was touched, there was no actual smoke or beef. In the worst conceivable way, his statements would turn out to be prophetic. The fact that Von initially had sincere regard for several of Youngboy's team complicated the entire feud. Early exchanges between Von and NBA colleagues raised the possibility of cooperation rather than hostility. However, peaceful cooperation was difficult because of Von's pride and drive to establish supremacy in every scenario. The squad was taken aback by Von's choice to visit the Hookah Lounge. According to 100,000 Track, his manager, Von led them to the Monaco Hookah Lounge, where he apparently knew Quando would be, even though they had assumed they were returning to their lodgings. There was no coincidence here. Von went hunting. Von appears to have been intentionally seeking trouble based on his social media posts from that evening, when he talks of catching someone and seeing them as food. It wasn't an issue of time or place being off. Von's addiction to violence outweighed his survival instincts. Thus, he purposefully put himself in danger. Von could never simply succeed, as the Youngboy feud demonstrated. In every room he went into, he had to be the most deadly, most revered, and most dreaded guy. In the end, his drive for domination cost him everything. Charleston White, who deemed King Von a devil, was being tortured by his affiliate Hay when Von passed away. Not everyone was in mourning. Charleston White made sure that everyone was aware of it. Von was a demon who plagued the streets of Chicago.
Fuck that idol. That idol is a demon, a self-proclaimed demon. Nigga, I don't ride with demons. When did black people start riding with demons?
And this man didn't hold back when he called him out for what he was. King Von was viewed by Charleston White as a devil, who deserved all of the karma that was directed at him. White wasn't merely spewing nonsense. What no one else wanted to say about Von's victims?
King Von was known to be a killer, a man who killed black people, a man who was accused of killing a black girl. He's celebrated, right? You got celebrities who take pictures in front of his mural. What about his victims' family?
He was vomiting out. Charleston White brought attention to the hypocrisy of Von's mourning while his victims went unnoticed. White questioned why the families of Von's alleged victims were being ignored while celebrities posed for photos in front of his artwork.
Shit you said about King Von? Nah, I already know where you at right now. So I need you to apologize right now. I'm finna come around that corner. I'm gonna give you 2 seconds, 10 seconds. Yeah, you scared now? Don't look.
For telling the truth about Von, the man even received death threats. White, however, was not about to back down. Charleston White doubled down on his disdain when a Von associate with a gun drew up to him and demanded an apology. White recognized something Von's supporters would not accept.
1, give you 10 seconds.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Fuck King Von all over again.
Okay.
1,
now check this out.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Fuck King Von mama all over again.
Oh, okay, mama too.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Fuck King Von baby all over again.
There was no reason to celebrate a murderer who tormented his own people. White asked why the families of Von's claimed victims were still suffering in silence while celebrities were posing for photos in front of his painting. Some people weren't going to let Von's fame obscure the suffering he created, as demonstrated by Charleston's courage to speak truth to power despite threats of death. Charleston White reminded everyone that the victims had families as well, even as the street glorified a devil, and their suffering was as important as any tribute, song, or mural. Not everyone was willing to worship at the shrine of a murderer simply because he could rap about his crimes, as demonstrated by his bravery in calling out Von's wicked behavior, even after he had passed away. Only after Von's passing do the streets respond with relief and horror. The street's differing responses to the news of Von's disappearance demonstrated how widely this man's horror had traveled throughout Chicago. Some were truly relieved that the ordeal was finally gone.
And then Von gave me a lot of passes. You know what I'm talking about? Like, he gave me a lot of passes through that motherfucker. He could have killed me a couple times over there on that side when seeing me.
While others lamented a legend, even those who knew Von well acknowledged that they were constantly afraid. Von's complex relationship with the so-called King of O-Block was made public by Trench's News, which had direct knowledge of Von, as the two handed each other passes in their village. He affirmed that his relationship with King Von was live and let live, but it's possible that King Von had the advantage and made the decision to kill him.
Let's try to get some money and shit.
True. So what's one of the craziest stories you could tell us about?
Oh no, I can't tell you no story. I'm seeing
It was brutally honest, not simply street politics. Trench's News said that he felt relieved for the community because Von was over there torturing them guys. This was a recognition that Von posed a real risk to everyone in his vicinity.
And it's like that. Like, can't nobody try to downplay his shit or none of that, bro. He like that. And if Von was here right now and I got on live and say, Von, you a pussy, you ain't like that. Alright, wait till I catch you. Wait till I get up. You know what I'm talking about? Like, he dead serious. He mean it, bro.
Von did more than simply frighten his alleged adversary. His reign of terror reverberated over the city. People realized Von's threats were more than simply empty words. He was more than willing to deliver on his promises of violence in every tweet, song, and stare down. Some of the friends of those Von was suspected of killing would post on social media following King Von's passing. The guy who was shot with Modell McCambry the night he was killed would post a picture of FBG Duck, stating that Duck would be delighted to join Von in the hereafter. Billionaire Black would post a picture of Modell McCambry, while Crack's friends would post tributes now that their friend's killer was dead. P5, Crack's cousin, would post on Facebook that he had been praying for the day King Von would be slain. It seems that they even caught 2 of the 3 people who were present when Crack was killed, according to posts made by Crack's younger brother, Big B, and other NBA Youngboy affiliates. Outside of Chicago, would make fun of King Von in an Instagram story, stating that it was amusing since he was the one who initiated the feud and disparaged NBA Youngboy, and now he was the one who had died. The street's response demonstrated the real effects of Von's reign of terror. Some hailed the end of a nightmare that had afflicted Chicago for years, while others lamented the loss of a fallen soldier.
And then he died because he went into shock. So I'm guessing if he would just laid there, he probably would have survived. So that he had 3 surgeries, but he made it. He was supposed to have 3 surgeries. He made it through 2. He hopped off the bed after the second surgery, and supposedly start fighting the nurse and asked the nurse where's his gun at.
It was evident how much harm one guy could bring to a whole society, because although some lived in open celebration of his passing, others were afraid to mention his name. Bo Deal and others described Von as a nightmare right up until the very
Von's
end.
legacy
Even
wasn't
on the
just the
hospital
music
bed,
he left
he continued to
behind. It
battle.
was the
Von
collective
left
trauma
behind
of
more
a
than
city
just
that
his
had to
songs.
live under the
Murder
shadow
was
of a
made into
predator who
entertainment
turned
by the
murder
collective
into
trauma of a
entertainment.
city
The
that had to
ultimate
live under
tragedy
the
of
shadow of a
Von's
predator.
legacy is
The
that
fact
his
that
story
King
could
Von's
have been so
narrative could have
different.
turned
His
out quite
genuine
differently
talent for
is the ultimate
storytelling and
tragedy of his
natural
legacy.
charisma could have
His
made him a
innate
powerful
charm and
voice for
sincere gift
positive
for
change
storytelling
in
would have
his
made him a potent
Instead,
advocate
his
for
inability
constructive
to
change in
separate
his
himself from
neighborhood.
the
Rather,
violence that
his
shaped
gifts
him
became
turned his
weapons that
gifts into
eventually
weapons
destroyed
that
everything
ultimately
he
destroyed
touched,
everything
because he was
touched.
unable to
Von's
distance
legacy
himself from the
serves as a
violence that
cautionary
molded
tale
him.
about the
Von's
price of
legacy is a
choosing
warning
violence
about
over
the cost of
redemption,
choosing
and how the
violence over
demons we
atonement,
refuse
and
to
how
face
the
will
monsters we
inevitably
reject
consume
can
not
eventually
just
devour
ourselves,
not
but
just
everyone we
ourselves,
claim
but
to
also
love.
everyone we
Indeed,
profess
many
to love.
rappers who
In
came in
fact,
contact
King
with
Von's
King
abilities
Von
made
were
many
scared to
rappers
death
who
because of what
interacted
he
with him
could do. But
extremely
not all
afraid.
of them were brave
However,
enough to
some of
spill
them
their
lacked the
grievances
courage to
until
voice
his
their
death.
complaints
If you
until his
enjoyed
passing.
watching this video,
Please click on the
and wouldn't
card that
mind
appears
more
on
of
the
such
screen if you
content,
liked
make
this
sure to
video.
click on the
And don't
card
mind
showing
seeing
on the
more of this
screen.
kind of content.